Welcome to this explainer. Okay, we're jumping right in today because we've got to talk about one of the most massive and frankly most frustrating disconnects of our modern era. We're talking about the gap between earning a college degree and actually navigating today's job market. If you, or maybe someone you know, has recently graduated, you totally already know the feeling. He spent 4 years studying, taking exams, paying all that tuition, only to step out into a hiring landscape that feels like it's speaking a completely different language. So today we're going to dive into the data to explore exactly why college is falling short of making us career ready. And more importantly, we'll look at how you can actually bridge that gap for yourself.
61%. Yeah, you heard that right. According to a recent analysis of nearly 100,000 job postings, 61% of so-called entry-level jobs now require at least 3 years of experience. Just pause and think about that paradox for a second. How exactly are you supposed to get 3 years of experience before you even enter the entry level, right? It's this massive structural contradiction, and it is literally leaving millions of recent graduates feeling completely stranded.
And the frustration out there is just palpable. I saw this quote pulled from a huge, highly debated Reddit thread on the topic, and one user wrote, "Almost nothing I've done in any job has involved anything I learned in school." And you know what? They definitely aren't alone. In that exact same thread, graduates from all sorts of fields admitted that sure, college taught them discipline or maybe how to research, but the actual day-to-day hard skills they use at work, up to 80% of that was learned entirely on the job.
Which brilliantly illustrates the real gamble students are taking these days. Another person in that thread basically hit the nail on the head, saying, college is like the stock market. Some degrees are great investments. Others become sunk costs and a waste of time. For decades, we've been sold this narrative that any college degree is a guaranteed golden ticket to a secure career. But the reality is, treating a four-year university like a guaranteed job training facility, that's an incredibly risky investment strategy.
Which brings us to Section 1, the limits of a degree and a history of misplaced expectations.
Let's rewind for a second. If we go all the way back to the 13th century, universities in Europe were heavily tied to religion and the liberal arts. A bachelor's degree was literally just a stepping stone toward a mastership to become a teacher. Fast forward a bit to the 1950s, and for the upper classes, college was largely a finishing school. I mean, nobody expected to land a corporate job just because they read Jane Austen, right? But today, in the 21st century, we've basically forced this centuries-old academic institution into being a mandatory vocational gateway.
There's this fantastic analogy from author and entrepreneur Danny Inney that perfectly captures the mess we're in. Think about a Japanese sword. It's a weapon, purpose-built from the ground up for combat. That is what actual, dedicated vocational training looks like. Now, compare that to nunchucks. Originally, nunchucks were literally just farm implements used to thresh wheat. They were repurposed into makeshift weapons when people weren't allowed to bear arms. Like, they work, but it's totally a forced fit. College is the nunchucks. We are awkwardly shoehorning a system built for theoretical education into a modern workforce requirement.
So, the really crucial thing to understand is that trying to game this nunchuck system usually backfires. Wharton professor Peter Capelli has done research that totally debunks some of our favorite degree myths. For instance, you see universities now offering these hyper-niche majors, like casino management or adventure tourism. But hey, if nobody is hiring in that specific niche when you graduate, you're stuck. And what about STEM? We always hear STEM is the ultimate silver bullet. Well, the data actually shows that only 20 to 25% of biology majors end up getting a job that uses biology. A degree simply doesn't magically guarantee a job, no matter what it's in.
All right, let's move to Section 2, the broken labor supply chain, and what happens when employers and universities completely disconnect.
You've really got to let these numbers sink in, because we are facing a massive preparedness gap. A Gallup poll found that an overwhelming 96% of chief academic officers at universities believe their students are fully prepared for the workforce. 96%. But ask the business leaders, and only 11% agree with them. That is a staggering disconnect. The people supplying the talent think they're doing an A-plus job, while the end users, the employers, think the product is completely unready.
Now you're probably wondering, wait, doesn't my college have a career center to fix exactly this? Well, think about this ratio. Research shows the average student-to-career staff ratio at colleges is 1,889 to 1. That's almost 2,000 students competing for the time and attention of a single career counselor. With severe underfunding and staff who are honestly often bogged down by administrative, event planning rather than real industry networking, it is mathematically impossible for career centers to provide the personalized, highly targeted guidance that students desperately need today.
But hey, to be fair, the blame absolutely does not sit entirely on higher education. Professor Capelli's research points the finger right back at the employers, too. We have what's called the employer paradox. Employers complain loudly that there's a massive skills gap, right? Yet they completely refuse to offer on-the-job training. Those old-school entry-level training programs have largely vanished. Instead, employers want to hire people who can do the job flawlessly on day one, which actually means they just want to poach people who are already doing the exact same job for a competitor. They want a ready-made product, but they refuse to help build it.
Okay, Section 3, Bridging the Experience Gap and some highly practical steps for students.
So, what do we actually do about this? Your first instinct might be to just stack up your resume with a bunch of online certificates. But here's the harsh truth. Nobody really gets hired just for clicking through a Coursera or LinkedIn Learning module. Micro-credentials are great for your own knowledge, for sure, but employers want to see those skills applied in the real world. Okay, so what about internships? Well, they're great, and they provide the highest return on investment for recruitment. The problem? They're scarce, insanely competitive, and geographically biased. If you don't live in a major city or go to a top-tier target school, traditional internships are incredibly hard to land.
So here's some really actionable advice based on what the data tells us. First up, delay declaring a major for as long as possible. The job market changes so fast, you don't want to lock yourself into a hyper-niche path too early. Second, recognize that your actual employability is likely going to be driven way more by your extracurricular experiences than your coursework. And third, maybe most importantly, if those traditional internships are out of reach, you need to actively seek out remote externships.
If you put them side by side, the differences are kind of staggering. Traditional internships are scarce, local, and honestly, sometimes you end up just fetching coffee because the mentorship is so hit or miss. Remote externships, on the other hand, are totally scalable. Because they are fully remote and project-based, companies can offer them to hundreds of students, totally regardless of what target school they attend or what city they happen to live in. They are democratizing access to the exact real-world experience employers are desperately demanding right now.
The whole point here is simple. It's real work for real brands. An externship typically only asks for about 10 to 15 hours a week and usually lasts for about 4 to 8 weeks. This means you can totally do them flexibly while you're still taking classes. Instead of putting a theoretical class project on your resume, you're building a tangible portfolio of applied skills, stuff like marketing, data analysis, consulting, and you did it for an actual functioning company. That is what recruiters actually care about. That is what bridges the gap.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 4, the future of hiring, and why it's all about skills over degrees.
Because the landscape, it's shifting dramatically. Huge tech titans like Google and Apple, along with massive consulting firms like PwC, they're actively dropping four-year degree requirements for a ton of their roles. And why are they doing that? Because the degree is just no longer a reliable signal of someone's capability. Instead, we're seeing this massive rise in skills-based assessments and simulation tools. Employers are evaluating what you can actually do, not just where you sat in a lecture hall. We're even seeing global companies do early outreach directly to high schoolers now, basically bypassing the college broker entirely.
So the biggest takeaway from this explainer is this. A college degree absolutely still has value. It teaches critical thinking, literacy, and it proves you can commit to a long-term goal. But it's not a vocational golden ticket. It's really just the beginning. The burden of proving your real-world capability, that falls on you. So I'll leave you with this final thought. If a degree is just the nunchucks, how are you going to step out into the real world, gain that applied experience, and forge your own sword? Thanks for checking out this explainer and keep learning out there.